It started with a phone call. Calm voice, official tone, said it was from a VA. An old man listened. A veteran, 92 years old, 30 years of service behind him. One mistake. They told him his benefit check had an issue. They needed to verify a few details. He believed them. Within minutes, his bank account was empty. Gone. Not just the money, but the trust, the dignity, the last piece of peace he had left. What they didn't know was who he really was. And by the time the truth came to light, it wouldn't just be about fraud. It would be about justice. The automatic doors hissed open as Harold Gentry stepped into the crowded lobby of Heritage National Bank. 92 years old, still sharp, still standing. The wool of his old Navy-issued coat barely held back the February chill that clung to his frame. His breath lingered in the air longer than most. He adjusted his kappa, faded navy one stitched with gold thread that read USS Lexington, 1952. Harold moved with the deliberate grace of someone who had learned long ago to preserve his strength. His steps didn't falter because of age, but because of memory-long marches, steep climbs, silent nights under foreign stars. The bank bustled with Friday foot traffic. Nobody offered him a seat. Nobody looked up from their phones. They didn't see the proud shoulders beneath his coat. They only noticed the stooped posture and the creased skin. He stood quietly in line, gloved hands tucked close to his chest. A woman ahead of him, probably mid-30s, turned and sighed loudly to her companion. "Why do they even come alone?" she muttered. "They always slow up the line." Harold said nothing. He simply pulled a letter from his coat pocket, a worn piece of government stationery from the Department of Veterans Affairs. It was a delayed payment notice for a military pension adjustment. Nothing big, just a few $100s. Enough to fix the broken heater in his apartment. When his turn came, the young clerk barely looked up. "Name?" she asked between loud pops of chewing gum. "Harold Gentry," he said. "I'm here about a direct deposit error. The VA said it would be posted today." She typed briefly, blew a bubble, then frowned. "Nothing's posted yet. Maybe check back next week, sir." Harold offered her the letter. They said it would be today. She barely glanced at it before handing it back. "Doesn't matter what that says. If it's not in the system, it's not here." A security guard leaning against the wall chuckled, just loud enough to be heard. Probably just confused. Thinks he's still in the Navy. Harold didn't respond. He simply nodded once and stepped aside. At the far end of the lobby, a janitor named Lonnie watched quietly. Her mop paused mid-stroke. She didn't say a word, but her eyes followed Harold as he paused by the American flag near the exit and raised 2 fingers to his brow in a silent salute. At home, Harold sat at his kitchen table, a chipped mug of black coffee steaming in front of him. The apartment was small, warm in some corners, drafty in others. The refrigerator buzzed with the hum of age. He placed the VA letter beside his yellow notepad, which held scribbled reminders: rent, utility bills, medication refills. The money he was expecting wasn't much, but to him, it meant warmth, food, and maybe a repair or 2 on the boots he'd worn since the Reagan era. Then the phone rang. "Mr. Harold Gentry?" The voice was smooth, professional. "This is Thomas Blake from Veteran Benefit Security. We've detected a potential issue with your incoming federal deposit. Your account may have been flagged for irregular activity." Harold furrowed his brow. "Flag? Yes, sir. This is a routine verification. If we don't act today, your stipends may be frozen for 60 to 90 days. I can help you now if you're ready to verify." Harold didn't trust easily. Never had. He'd once camped in freezing trenches for weeks because he didn't trust the safety of an abandoned cabin. But the voice had just the right mixture of authority and courtesy. And he'd been expecting that money. "What do you need?" "Just a 2-step verification. We've sent an OTP code to your phone. Please read it back." Harold's flip phone buzzed. A 6-digit code flashed on the screen. "You're doing great, sir," the voice coaxed. "This is just to ensure no one else can access your account." Harold read the number slowly. 358729. There was a pause. "Perfect. You're all set. Funds should arrive shortly. Thank you again for your service." The line went dead. Harold stared at the phone, uneasy. Something deep in his Guillotine instinct honed through decades of survival twitched. He shuffled to his laptop and logged into his bank portal. The screen loaded. $0. His heart dropped. Everything gone. His hand trembled not from age, but from the sting of betrayal. He had faced death with a rusted M16 and steady hands. But this was shame. He had been robbed by a voice on a phone. And for the first time in years, Harold Gentry didn't know whether what burned in his eyes was anger or tears. He didn't sleep that night. He sat in his chair by the window, the VA letter crumpled on the floor. The glow of the street lamp outside cast long shadows across his living room, shadows that reminded him of flares before firefights, of silhouettes in the dark. He drank lukewarm coffee, reheated from the day before, and watched the hours tick by. At dawn, a knock at the door. Mrs. Nora Ellison from 1A stood with a plate of scrambled eggs and toast. "I saw your light on all night," she said. "Thought you could use a bite." Harold managed a weak smile. "Thank you, Nora." She touched his arm gently. "You all right?" He wanted to say yes, that he was fine, that it would all work out. But the words never came. After she left, Harold looked around his apartment, his home of over 20 years, and felt something crack. They hadn't just stolen his money. They'd stolen his dignity. But he wasn't going to stay broken. By 8, he was dressed in his best shirt pressed, slacks creased, his navy cap snug on his head. He walked the 5 blocks to the police station. Every step deliberate, focused. Inside, the precinct buzzed with monotony. The officer at the reception desk didn't look up. "I need to report a theft," Harold said evenly. "Take a number," the officer sighed. Harold waited. His number blinked on the screen nearly an hour later. The officer who finally saw him looked barely 30. Pale, dismissive. "Name?" "Harold Gentry." "Okay, Mr. Gentry. What's the issue?" "I was scammed. They cleaned out my account. Said they were with the VA." The officer leaned back. "You give him a code or something?" Harold nodded. The officer chuckled. "Man, don't you old-timers watch the news? Never give codes. That's like Rule 1. Harold clenched his jaw. "I came to report a crime." "Well," the officer said, shrugging, "we're not your bank, sir. Maybe try your credit union." Harold stood a little straighter. "I served 30 years. I buried friends who died to defend this country. And you're laughing." Another officer walking past Black, maybe mid-30s, paused, watching the exchange. Harold turned to leave. The officer behind the desk muttered under his breath, "These old guys think the world owes them something just cause they wore a uniform once." Harold stopped. "No," he said quietly. "The world owes me nothing. But you owe that badge a little respect." And he walked out. Lonnie, the janitor from the bank, was sweeping her building steps as Harold returned home. She paused. "You all right, Mr. Gentry? You look like something shifted. Had to file a police report. Someone cleaned me out." She frowned. "Did they help?" Harold didn't answer. Then she asked, "Sir, may I take your photo?" Harold blinked. "What for?" "Because people need to see this. They need to remember." She snapped the photo. Harold, standing in front of the flag outside their building, holding the VA letter like it was the last scrap of his pride. That night, Lonnie posted it online. Captioned, "This is Harold Gentry, 92, Navy vet, 30 years served. Lost everything to a scam. Mocked by police. We could do better." By morning, it had gone viral. Thousands of comments. One from a Marine. "Gentry? Commander Gentry? He's a legend. I served under him." Another. "He pulled my brother from a wreck in 72. We owe this man." By midday, news vans crowded Harold Street. At 2 o'clock, a reporter stood outside his door. Harold remained in his chair, the television on, his name scrolling across the screen. Viral outrage. Decorated Navy veteran dismissed by local police. The nation calls for action. Then the phone rang again. "Mr. Gentry, this is Lydia Moore with the Office of the President. I'm calling at the President's request." Harold sat up. "We're deeply sorry, sir. You haven't been forgotten. We are investigating the scam and reviewing the police department's conduct." Harold exhaled. "I didn't ask for any of this. I just wanted to be heard." "Well," Moore replied, The whole country's listening now. Outside, a black SUV arrived. A uniformed officer stepped out. Colonel Brent Hayes, once a recruit under Gentry's command. He stood at attention. The precinct scrambled. Headline screamed. Commander ignored. Justice demanded. The FBI traced the scam call registered to a burner phone from an internal corruption case. The name tied to it? Officer David Myers, the same one who mocked Harold. By 9 p.m., Myers was in cuffs. Harold watched the broadcast from his chair, surrounded by Lonnie, Nora, and two ROTC cadets who now refused to leave his side. He didn't feel revenge. He felt release. Not from pain, but from invisibility. When reporters asked if he had any words for the man who called him an old fool, Harold turned calmly to the cameras. "I've been called worse by better men," he said, "and I've never needed to raise my voice to prove my worth." Weeks later, a plaque was unveiled at a military memorial. Commander Harold Gentry, U.S. Navy. Rescuer. Defender. Leader. We remember because he never forgot us. Beside it, the president's liaison awarded him the Presidential Medal for Civil and Military Integrity. Harold raised his hand in one final salute. The cadets snapped theirs in return, crisp and unified. A man once deemed invisible had become unforgettable. And as Harold Gentry lowered his hand, he whispered, more to himself than anyone else, "I didn't fight for medals. I fought for moments like this." The wind rustled the flags behind him. And somewhere far beyond the ceremony, a generation stood taller because one man refused to shrink.